Thank you everyone for showing up to our webinar for July, and this will be fun. So the topic is how to stand out in a crowded market. And since the Vermont Brewers Fest is coming up in July, I thought it would be timely to talk about beer and brewing, but I feel like all of these strategies and ideas can really have anything to do whatever type of food or whatever type of business that you need to market. So I think we all have stuff to learn and good stuff to share. So today we'll be talking with Andrea of 14th Star Brewing and Drew of Long Trail Brewing Company. And I should say 14th Star Brewing Company, excuse me. And first, let's speak with Drew. And Drew, if you could, I'm going to stop taking over the camera, and I'll let you, talk about Long Trail. Okay. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Let me.
Sure. There you go.
Get control here. So, can you see my full screen, or is it just?
Well, yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Hi. How's it going, everyone? My name is Drew. I'm from Long Trail Brewing Company. I am the communications manager. Been here for about 5 years, working in various different roles in the marketing department. And yeah, I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about sort of what we do to stand out as kind of a larger brewery in the craft space. So I put together a few slides to show, kind of illustrate some of the sort of things we do to put into practice, and let's just get started and get rolling. Start with a little bit of a history about Long Trail. We have been around since 1989. We were founded, started out as the Mountain Brewers, was the original name of our brewery, brewing a beer called Long Trail Ale. Was sort of the first beer we did. Our original brewery was in Bridgewater Corners, in this tiny little woolen mill down in the basement, pretty dark space, pretty modest beginning. And through that time period in the late 80s, early 90s, the goal of the company was to just create something that was a domestic alternative to a lot of those popular imports that were on the shelves, a lot of those English beers and German beers that were coming in and really, really popular at that time in the beer landscape. So we've been brewing our flagship Long Trail Ale for, since 1989. It's been, something that we've definitely kind of, the brand was called Mountain Brewers, and they were known as the Long Trail guys because of the Long Trail Ale is what kind of the local nickname for the company. So from there, Long Trail Brewing Company just seemed like a natural transition as we were beginning to grow and kind of, spread out throughout Vermont. So, fast forward to today, we're in the top 50 of craft brewers, according to the Brewers Association. They put out a list every year of based on volume. So a lot of the larger craft brewers are on it, and I think this year we came in around 32. In previous years, we've been a little bit higher. That translates to about 100,000 barrels a year, which I will say also includes Otter Creek and The Shed, who is part of the Long Trail family of brands. Otter Creek was acquired in 2009, and The Shed brand was acquired in 2011. So part of my work in marketing is I do the communications for all three brands. That includes social media, video, photography, copywriting, brand development, website management, content management, you name it. And if it's related to communications, I'm, pretty much kind of tasked with getting that message out for our brands, which, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but that is one thing that poses probably the most challenge for when you have a lot of breweries that are able to focus on one brand, but we have to kind of, spread a message of three brands out to multiple states. And so now I didn't include this part, but Long Trail is distributed to 13 states throughout the Eastern Seaboard and including Washington, D.C. So moving on, social media communications. Kind of this is where we put a lot of our marketing energy at this time. We do some print advertising, but a lot of our focus is on social media. It's on and what we do is we try to incorporate the lifestyle, but also incorporate the character of the brewery, incorporate the exciting beers that the brewers are producing, and we do a lot to focus on that brewery experience. And part of one thing we've been doing to kind of stand out in what is a market that is nearing saturation is try to show some of the smaller projects that we're working on, some of the beers that you might not necessarily be able to get out in in Washington, D.C., in New York City, in Boston, in Hartford, Connecticut. Really showing people that we do brew beer comes from a real place. There's a real crew of people that work on it, and there's and we try to also put that beer into kind of, I like to use the phrase like FOMO-inducing situations. Just creating a context around our brands and our beers that actively portray the kind of outdoors lifestyle that we've built our brand on, while also, kind of making people sort of want to associate that with our beers. So to tie that back into my background, I know I'm going out of order here, but my background is in photojournalism. I studied journalism in undergraduate. I got my master's degree in photojournalism. So I like to take a real journalistic approach to how we manage our channels, how we manage our content. I like to think of myself as the storyteller and kind of the marketing department's role of kind of telling that story of our brand, but also in kind of a real-time fashion, but also getting a behind-the-scenes view and giving a lot of context behind the beers, as opposed to just showing sexy beer shots, which we do plenty of, but having more of production stuff, the day-to-day, and really getting a lot of the faces that are associated with the beer, and getting the community involved as well as much as we can. So with that, we'll move on to kind of a little bit more about the background of Long Trail. We have a number of outdoor related marketing partners. We actually just got done with a meeting with the Green Mountain Club, who are the caretakers of Long Trail, to figure out sort of how we can kind of grow that partnership and grow that more than just having our beer name be Long Trail, our company be Long Trail Brewing Company. So our key marketing partners at this time for outdoor, Green Mountain Club, like I said, Ski Vermont. We work pretty closely with them on some programming that helps us activate sales throughout our distribution footprint, and also keeps us tied into a lot of their events. And it's a really awesome partnership for us to kind of be the official beer of Ski Vermont. We do some work with the Vermont Mountain Bike Association. Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports is a huge partner for ours. We do an annual event every year called the Century Ride that we raise money for adaptive sports. It is their largest fundraiser, and this year we actually helped them raise about $280,000 for adaptive sports. So that's a really cool one. They're based out of Pico, and it's a huge relationship for us. And Flying Ryan Hawks Foundation, we did a beer called Flying Ryan IPA, where a portion of proceeds went to that foundation. So other notable sponsorships that help us kind of stay engaged with the community and keep us having that small feel is the Century Ride, like I mentioned. We'll be doing some stuff with the U.S. Open of Mountain Biking, which is in Killington this August. And then we do Feel Good Fridays with the High Fives Foundation, and that's also with Vermont Adaptive. So that's a wintertime event where we help raise money for adaptive sports and for athletes who have had injuries from as a result of extreme sports. So those are just some small events that we participate in to help engage that local Killington community, and also kind of the larger Vermont community. And we look at them as a lot of our branding that we come out with has that outdoor vibe to it. It has that culture, that lifestyle that our company was founded on back in '89. So I'll keep moving on here if that's all right with everyone. And I wanted to highlight this project that as a kind of a case study for us, engaging our community in a way for us to be a larger brewery that also has a very local flair, local projects that we work on that also gain interest throughout our footprint. So a real awesome marketing exercise, and also a great project that we worked on last summer was a beer we called Medicator, and it was a collaboration with Loose Farm, who is a farm out in Stockbridge that they grow hemp, and they create this product called it's a hemp honey. So they infuse honey with CBD, and so we got together with them, and it was a real organic project. They come to the brewery a lot, and they hang out for beers, and they've got to know the staff there, and a lot of staff has kind of become enamored with their hemp product and the benefits of CBD for managing chronic pain or for relieving anxiety. So that was something that their honey kind of organically spread throughout the pub staff, the brew staff, and everybody got really interested in it, to the point where the idea came up, like, how can we incorporate this into a beer? How can we make this a small beer? So we went out and we visited the farm, and we brewed a batch of beer we brewed a couple of batches of beer that turned out really great. They were 1-barrel batches from our pilot system, hyper local, just really only sold at our brewery, and we sold through them amazingly quickly. Like, got an awesome response just because we were the first brewery to be incorporating CBD in a beer, and so we got a very, very awesome social media reach, like very viral. We do a lot of paid advertising for social media, but for this particular beer, the reach was very organic. It was something that people were sharing. They were, letting everyone know, everyone that they thought was interested in it, they were sharing it. And it was a very, very cool exercise to see how that little project that started just as just as a fun little project for our brewers, turned into a wildly successful can release. We went through about 300 cases in one weekend, which for us, a larger brewery that distributes most of our stuff throughout the state and out of state, we don't necessarily get those long lines that a lot of the smaller breweries get for their can releases. We don't necessarily thrive off of the hype that a lot of other breweries get, just because of our scale and because we've been around for a while. So it was a really cool project for us to see that. Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on. You kind of cut out there for a little bit.
Okay.
So we can. I think now we've been talking for about for a little while. So why don't we have Andrea come on next, and so you can stop sharing. But we can come back to we'll be talking more about Long Trail and what So if you could stop sharing, and then yeah. All right. Hey, Andrea.
All right. Hi there. So, whoops. I guess I need to hit share first. All right. I did not create a presentation the way that Drew did, but we also have a very unique take on establishing our brand in this somewhat crowded market. Here in Vermont, we're very, very fortunate that we end up with 60 plus breweries and a ton of great beer to choose from. But we also, as craft brewers, have to figure out a way, not only do we continue to enjoy each other's product, but also to create, our shelf space separate from others. So a little bit of our history. We are a veteran-owned craft brewery that got its initial licensing in 2011, started brewing in 2012. Started in the idea for the brewery was conceived on the battlefields of Afghanistan. Our two founders were deployed, and just in an exercise to kind of keep their minds sharp, they decided they were going to write a business plan for a brewery. They had been brewing beer together at home for a number of years, kind of as a way to get some guy time and spend some time away from their families. And so they decided they were going to write this business plan for a brewery. And then when they returned home, they kind of tossed the ideas around a little bit. And one of those founders is my brother, Stephen. And I remember having these conversations with him where he wasn't sure if this was something that he wanted to jump into, until finally his wife said, listen, I'm sick of hearing about it. Either do something about it or shut up. And so they took some loans out against their retirements from the Army and started building our initial brewery. Started in an old garage with equipment that was mostly homemade. Our initial brew system started as maple sap collection tanks that they welded and rigged to become a brew house. Our initial cold storage room was cooled with home air conditioners, a number of them set in the walls. So it was very much a labor of love, but also one that started from basically nothing. In fact, come to find out, after I had left my job to come work at the brewery, even the numbers that they used in their business plan were mostly made up because they didn't have access to a whole lot of factual data. So we started brewing in 2012, and it wasn't long. St. Albans used to have a brewery here, but it went out about 10 years before they started. Rail City Ale was the brewery, or was the beer that was produced here. And so apparently St. Albans had been starved for a local brewery for a number of years. So as soon as they started, the following that they gathered developed very quickly. Within 2 years, originally they were brewing just nights, weekends, whenever they had an opportunity to, filling growlers like 2 days a week. And I would come in and I would help them on days where they needed somebody to fill growlers, when they had family commitments or they weren't able to come in. And within a couple of months of when they first started selling beer from the original brewery, lines would go from the door out the tap room all the way to the road. People looking to fill their growlers. So within 2 years, they had to hire a full-time brewer, and he had trained at Long Trail and also at the Shed. And so, no, I'm sorry, not Long Trail, Von Trapp and the Shed. And then shortly thereafter, we hired a second brewer so that they could brew all the time. And they were self-distributing pretty much in and around St. Albans, and not spotty here and there in Burlington, but not much. And everything that they were brewing, they were selling almost immediately. So they started to look for a place to expand. And the decision was made for our current location, which is kind of weird because it's it's at the very end of a strip mall in St. Albans. But the landlord, the building owner, was very, very partial to Stephen and Matt, very patriotic. Tony Pomerleau did a lot of things to support veterans organizations. So he really kind of romanced Stephen and Matt with this location and provided a lot of setup for them. And we opened our doors here to the public in November of 2014. So just 2.5 short years after we started brewing. We now have a 30-barrel brew house. We went from 3 barrels up to 30 barrels, and we'll do about 8,000 barrels this year. So in comparison to Long Trail, we're quite a bit smaller. In that time, we have developed a reputation as the brewery that gives back. Both Stephen and I grew up in this area. Our kids, his kids are growing up here. My kids grew up here. In fact, the place that is now our brewery used to be the local bowling alley where Stephen and I used to come as teenagers and with our kids, and we kept a portion of one of the bowling lanes to create our bar top with. So this area is definitely what we call home. So we wanted to make sure that those people that supported the brewery from day one, we gave back to them. So a lot of what we do with the community in mind. And it's not just our local community, it's also our veteran community and also our brewing community. And so this past year, we went through kind of a whole rebranding. One of the things that we realized was that some people knew of our reputation as the community gives back. Some people knew of our history with the military, and some people knew that we created really great beer. So what we wanted to do was kind of wrap those all together in one easy tagline and branding all of our merchandise, all of our labels, all of our marketing and advertising with the same message, that we create award-winning beer in a community that we care about, and that all stems from our service to our country. So we came up with the slogan, "Brewed with a Mission." And a lot of times I'll be at an event, I'll be at a festival, and someone will ask, "What is your mission?" And it is just that, to make sure that we create high quality beer so that we can give back to those that have supported us from the beginning. And so what you're seeing on the screen now is our new branding. We're keeping our original logo because that was, Vermont being the 14th state in the Union, and having the tie to our military that we do, keeping that logo and the tie to Vermont and the history was very, very important to us. And so, let's see, this is our, we came up with a 4-page booklet to just kind of introduce our 6 core beers that we release out to the public, and to give just a little description of them. But what we're also wanting to make sure is that people understand, I don't know if it's coming down, yeah, that our commitment to the community includes every single one of our core beers. All of our core beers support one charity or another. Valor, from its inception, was used to support Purple Hearts Reunited, part of our veteran community, finding and returning lost or stolen medals of valor. Our Follow Me was created specifically to support the Josh Pilata Fund. Josh was a Vermont soldier who took his own life upon his return from deployment, and his family created this fund to ultimately build Josh's house, which will be a recreational and rehabilitative home for Vermont soldiers suffering from PTSD. And ultimately, that would be kind of the first of many that they would like to see throughout the United States. So we're working on fundraising for that. Our Recruit Golden Ale is one that we have just partnered with Vermont Adaptive Sports, because they have a veteran arm that they work with our veterans who are either disabled or who have struggled, and want to keep them active, keep them out there, or getting back into an active lifestyle. Our Maple Breakfast Stout is one that we use to support food shelves and soup kitchens. And so in our tribute works with supporting our friends at Make-A-Wish. And then our B72 is kind of the one beer that we keep as kind of the catch-all. That's the one that we pledge a portion of the proceeds from every batch, but that is reserved for those one-off donation requests that we get, whether it's the local animal shelter here or other charities. And one of the things that we realized is that while a lot of Vermonters understand that we pair a lot of our beers with various charities, it didn't matter to our out-of-state consumers because it wasn't benefiting them. So what we did beginning 2018 is, while Valor Ale will continue to support Purple Hearts Reunited throughout their work around the United States, and the same thing with the Josh Pilata Fund, things like Tribute, Recruit, and Maple Breakfast Stout could be used to support programs like the ones they support here in Vermont in all of the areas that we distribute in. That way, the consumers that are helping to support our business, not just here in Vermont, but in other areas, are receiving the support back from us that they're giving to us. And so that's an initiative. You'll be seeing some press releases coming out about that very soon. And so one of the biggest things for us is making sure that our story gets told, whether it is our branding with our Brewed with a Mission, the look of our cans, that when people walk into a beer cave, one of the things that I'm often caught off guard by is how overwhelming it is with the amount of selection that we have available to us. It's wonderful on one hand, but it can also be like completely overwhelming, and you know, you kind of shut down. I don't know what I want to choose because there's so much to choose from. And so our branding, we try to keep it all with the same look, so that when people walk into a beer cave there and they see our brand, they know that it's us. They know that it's, you know, it's a beer that they have had that brand before, and they can trust that it's going to be a great beer in that can, but it's also going to be used to support, they can feel good about purchasing that beer because it's going to be used to support others. And the same thing is true with our social media. We've just recently relaunched our website to have this new branding consistent across the board. And our Facebook posts, our Twitter feed, our Instagram posts, 90% of them are about what we're doing out there in the community, as well as, you know, shots of our beer or other people's, when they bring our beer hiking or snowmobiling or wherever. So we like to make sure that our consumers not only feel connected to our brand, but that we're as connected to them in bringing their presence to our social media as well.
Thanks. That was very interesting. And for both, let me just say that. So, you know, what I'm initially thinking of is, you want to stop sharing screens, or let me see, do we have that going on? I'm wondering, you know, since you were just started, I mean, 14th Star just started a few years ago, relatively young business. And so I would say, I'm wondering about the challenges of scaling up and how that, right? Yeah. But I would think Long Trail would have had a similar experience, maybe a different sizing, but, you know, when you, Long Trail has, you know, does many more bottles of beer, you know, cans of beer and versus 14th Star, but, you know, how do you deal with scaling up or just, you know, changing your market, or, you know, Andrea, why don't you go first with that?
Well, one of the hardest things, no worries. One of the tough things when scaling up so extreme is that there is a significant financial impact. You know, you're committing millions of dollars and hoping that the return is there to pay for that commitment. And I think that's true for, it doesn't matter if it's beer or widgets or what have you. And so it can be quite stressful in trying to deal with that much cash going out in hopes that that same amount will or more will come back to you. I think that's probably one of the most challenging things. And in this market today, with the mobile canning and self-distribution, there are so many beers out there. There are, you know, I was out visiting some package stores yesterday, and amazing to me the amount of breweries that are canning and sending their beers out to distribution. It's a wonderful opportunity for consumers, but it's difficult to compete. You know, we don't can every small batch, every experimental batch that we make, because the significant investment in cans and artwork, and whereas a small brewery, they don't make a ton of money off of those cans from the mobile cannery, but they're able to get their product in front of many, many more people than they would if they were just selling it from their tap room, especially in a place like Vermont, where getting from one place to another is not always the easiest. And traveling around the state, you know, there are so many wonderful tap rooms in the state, but I've still not been to them all, simply because it's an adventure to get there.
Yeah, well, there's certainly, that's why we're talking about so many beers in Vermont. And, you know, I know when I look at if I go to a store to look at beers, I'm like, it's amazing, but it's almost, it can be hard to make a choice, right? So Drew, when Long Trail's doing these smaller batches, smaller, new, because you'll be, you have that series of partnering with farms, and you're doing those fruit beers, and do you, I guess I'm wondering, that's purely in-state. It'll only be at your pub, basically? Or you can't?
Yeah, those will basically just be small, probably 4 logs of each beer.
Yeah.
At our brewery only.
Oh, so when when Long Trail is of a good size, and I'm wondering, when you look at entering a new market or new area, as regards distribution and that kind of thing, how do you think about marketing that, or how do you get the word out in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as Andrea was speaking, I was just thinking about, we had entered Ohio a few years back, and I was part of the team that got to go out and check it out. And you really do think about how, the further you get from Vermont, the less that kind of Vermont message translates, especially when you put hikers and outdoors, the outdoors on your packaging. It gets kind of polarizing if you're in a place like Ohio.
Right, there can be a disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one thing. Your hope is that you can send people there and have the resources to get people on the ground level to do it, and get all the proper placements that you need to get. But for us, that was one of the we actually pulled out of Ohio, I believe, recently, partly out of our own shortcomings, staffing there, and partly out of our distributor. Once that romance period of a new beer was over for the distributor that we worked with out there, it became really difficult to manage where the beer was going, how fresh the beer was staying. And that was kind of one of the growing pains of scaling up, so to speak, is your brand not resonating. And then Ohio has become a place where people from the West and people from the East kind of converge as they try to grow contiguously. So it's really a challenge to keep that marketing meaningful to someone who isn't in Vermont. So we try to do that by creating those posts that like I said, FOMO inducing, that put you in a place that you want to associate drinking a beer with, whether it's by the river or after a hike or skiing. You hope that you can kind of put yourself in a space, in a mind frame that you associate, our beer with a fun experience that you have.
I had to unmute myself. Excuse me. So I have a couple of questions, but let's just talk about channels basically for a moment. And, what channels would you say have worked best for you? You might be, there's social media versus email marketing versus events, because that's another channel. And what roles and what works best for you? And Drew, why don't you go first, and Andrea can talk about that.
Yeah, I'd say right now at this moment, Facebook and Instagram are doing a great job for us getting a large number of people, kind of getting a lot of people information quickly and kind of reliably. The interesting thing about the email marketing is that the demographic is so much different than what the Facebook demographic is. So that sometimes, it takes a little bit longer to craft an email message, but it usually turns out to be pretty fruitful because it gets into a different demographic. So I'd say right now those virtual spaces have been kind of the best for us, the most successful. Event wise, it's great to go out in the field and sample people on your beers and get in front of people, but that's something that we're still growing. We're developing that a little bit more. So the more people we can get at our brewery, like the Century Ride, the better it is, because they see that there's this space like on the river in Vermont that's beautiful, great place to drink a beer. So yeah, I'd say digitally is where we're succeeding mostly.
Andrea?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a really good mixture of social media and email. One of the things that we were very surprised by when we opened the tap room here was that the demographic that we were expecting, we really don't have a demographic. When you look at our tap room, the people that are sitting around the bar on any, given afternoon, it's 22 to, 21 to 80. And they are from every walk of life. It's not, while craft beer is significantly more expensive than big beer, it's not, economic status is not an indicator of whether or not you're a craft fan. It's really amazing to me to see all of the different professions that are being represented in our tap room, and it's true across the board, not just in our tap room, but just in the consumer demographic completely. It's everything. It's every walk of life. It's every income level, male, female, young, old. It doesn't matter. And so to make sure that we can hit those demographics, we keep signage up in our tap room for events that we're throwing. We do a lot of events in the community. In a couple of weeks, we're doing a music festival down at the Bay on Lake Champlain. So it's not just in our tap room, and it's something that we offer to the community, and advertising by email for that older demographic, and then by social media for maybe the younger demographic that spends so much of their time on social media, is what's proving to be the most successful mix for us.
So, this makes me, let's talk about food tourism. Let's talk about beer tourism. Now, there are so many, we've got a beer passport, a beer trail. People can go, drive across the state, stop at this brewery here, get stamped, have beers, go to another one. How does that, when you are, and that, I guess, speaks to what you were talking about, the variety of people who come to visit and buy your beers, both. And what do you do? How do you promote that to come have people from out of state visit, or how do you, take advantage of that, the popularity of beer tourism, or just food tourism in general in Vermont? True, why don't we go with you?
Yeah, sure. So we do, both our facilities in Middlebury and in Bridgewater Corners, we have pub menus. So we've been kind of making Long Trail's been sort of a destination for a number of years just because of its location on the way on Route 4 to Killington. So you get a lot of the traffic from Connecticut or Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey coming through and going to Killington for the weekend and driving right by the brewery. So we get a lot of traffic there, and we've got a pretty people really enjoy the food at the brewery, which is kind of over the years we've been refining it and working with Vermont Fresh Network, obviously, and kind of local producers, and trying to make a menu that is really appeals to a lot of people while also creating a space. It's in the summertime, it's an awesome outdoor space, and we're adding a music series every Thursday to try to capture that tourism attention. And same thing, we're doing the same thing at Otter Creek. New menu. We just got a new pub manager there, so he'll be refining things now. And we created a new patio last year in an outdoor space just so that we can be kind of on people's radar, just so people know that there is a brewery in Middlebury that has an outdoor space and a place to grab lunch, and a place to, if you're coming through Vermont, kind of the back way, and you're going up Route 7, you can stop in Middlebury on your way up to some of the great breweries up north. So we've been putting a lot of attention on both the atmosphere and the vibe and the beers. That's where the small batch beers. So it's not only about the kind of the beers that we distribute outside your market, but if you come to the brewery, you can get something different. You can see what our brewers are doing, what we're working on. So having that, creating that experience for people has been a focus for ours at both breweries for sure. And I think it's important for us being a bigger brewery to show that we're not just, don't just come and get the hits. You come and you can get other beers and smaller projects that you might not be able to get at your local grocery store.
Andrea, so I'm wondering regarding 14th Star and your placement, because I've seen where you're located, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go. You have the new Grazers next, attached, the hamburger place, and since you're, we have people coming from out of state all the time, and like as I was saying, traveling through the state, and they come and they buy the beer. How do you stay in contact with them and to bring them back? Certainly, we were talking. You were talking before about men and women who've been in the military and that connection there. And I know Steve was just given an award for. You can talk a little bit about that. But I'm like, how do you keep those connections to have people come back?
Sure. So one of the things that we do here is we have a big glass bowl that has people write down where they're from. It gives us their name and the state that they're from and an email address. And once a month, we draw someone from that glass bowl. And that person we contact and they get swag or gift card or sometimes cash. In an attempt to just, we want to see where everybody is coming from. We get a lot of out-of-state repeat visitors simply because here in St. Albans we have Lake Champlain right nearby, and it's a beautiful little city that has gone through a whole lot of renovations over the last couple of years. And when people see that the things that we're doing, a lot of times they're very interested to come in and see how things have changed, the transition here over the years. We're always changing things up a little bit. We changed the food, and Grazers does a great farm to table. Their gourmet burgers are going to be the death of me, but they're wonderful. And so just constantly encouraging people to come see what else we're doing new, and bringing some of those events outside of the brewery. Like I mentioned, was the music festival, and then we do have the Vermont Craft Beer Half Marathon in September. Getting people to recognize that St. Albans is more than just a brewery. We do bring a number of out-of-state tourists or out-of-town tourists into St. Albans, but giving them the opportunity to see that there's more to St. Albans than just the brewery, that this is a great city that has some really great charm, wonderful people, and great food, and atmosphere. And so trying to consistently engage them and get them to come and see what else we're doing is how we continue to keep them coming back. We have this one couple that every year for their anniversary in August, they live in Boston. They go up to Montreal for the weekend. And every year they stop here on their way up to have a beer and on their way back to bring some beer back with them. So it's become kind of this annual pilgrimage for them. And we get to be a part of that stop for them.
Drew, I'm curious. Since Long Trail's been around for so long, and you were talking about the challenges of making that connection to customers or consumers who are out of state, because there can be kind of, if someone's who lives in North Dakota, maybe they don't have a connection to Vermont or in the city where they're like, well, I don't go hiking, but would you say that is what's your biggest challenge, would you say? Is it because you've been around for a while and people are like, oh, Long Trail, they're always there and I can always get them and I want something new? Or is it that trying to build those connections with new consumers?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with, I think it's that we've been around for a while. We've been around since 1989, and a lot of the industry is what's shiny and new. And there's a lot of awesome beer that's coming out of Vermont. So in Vermont, it's that we're, I think we're a little bit too out there, like you see it and it's a steady, it's always going to be there and you always recognize it. And so I think there might be a perception that maybe it's not exciting, or it's your father's beer or your grandfather's beer even at this point. So think in Vermont, that's kind of the sort of hindrance and the struggle. And then I think outside of Vermont with beer tourism, I think it's the fact that there's obviously some breweries from Vermont that are super awesome, and people started the whole beer tourism thing. And I think people look at it and they're like, oh, well, I can get this here, so I don't have to travel for it. And the mystique is kind of gone. And then you have local breweries. Every state now has pretty awesome brewing scene going on, whether it's folks that used to come from Boston to get, Heady Topper, or folks that came from upstate New York. They now have amazing breweries that are in their backyard. And I think people are interested in drinking local, and breweries are no longer, let's go to a brewery. It's like, hey, let's go to the bar, and the bar happens to be a brewery as well. I mean, I find it in my own drinking habits when I go out in town. I spend a lot of time. I live in Heinsberg, so when I go to Burlington, my favorite place to go is Zero Gravity, and it's like you're going to the bar, but you're also going. The bar happens to be at a brewery now, and that's totally different from, I think, what it used to be, a special occasion. I think people want that community and that local feel, which is sort of what a lot of the initiatives we've been doing have been trying to capture that and sort of partake in that sort of trend.
Yeah, well, I would say both of you. I mean, there's a similarity there, of course. You both have 14th Star with your pub, and and Long Trail with your location. It's that idea of building that community, and I think that's what it comes down to in communication and marketing, and building those connections basically through messaging or a social mission, right? That's part of the strategy. I'm going to just ask, does anyone have any questions to the people, to the class? Any questions who are listening? And feel free to, go to the chat box and ask a question. But if not, I'll just keep going. I guess that's what, and then I say to you regarding challenges, Andrea, is it the scaling up? Is that the biggest challenge that you have, or is there something else that you would say is greater, and how do you try to overcome that?
I think scaling up initially was a huge challenge. As I said, being so new, having only been in business for 2 years and not having, a whole ton of cash reserves, that scaling up was a significant, it was definitely an issue. However, I think now part of the issue is knowing when is the right time. Drew alluded to Ohio and making sure that you have somebody, boots on the ground to make sure your beer is going in the right place, and how you dealt with a lackluster distributor. And that's been an issue across the board, I think, for a lot of breweries. When you sign with a distributor, it's amazing how excited they are to get your brand. And then once you're part of the 300 craft brands that they're representing, you're not the shiny new penny anymore. And it becomes difficult to be that brand that's the forefront of each salesperson's mind when they're meeting with accounts. And so when is it the right time to bring in a salesperson of your own to be the one meeting with all of those accounts and getting in front of the people who make the decisions as to what brands they're going to carry, whether it's on draft or in package, and getting the tastings and making sure that your story is told. We had been with a distributor for a couple of years out of state, and our story wasn't being told. There's a significant population that feels connected to those that have served in the military, especially combat veterans, and very, very few people knew of our history, knew of our where we started and our commitment to the community, and that was simply a product of being one of a lot of brands that each salesperson has to remember when they meet with accounts, and when is the right time to bring someone on board so that you're making the initiative, the initial contact, and taking the initiative to make sure that you're the first brand that accounts think of when they have an empty tap line, or when they have some cooler space with you know, an empty spot.
So, you know, you're both kind of saying in a similar way, probably maybe a different level of it, but, you know, if people are looking for the shiny and new, right, no matter if you're a smaller brewer who's been around 4 years or 6 years, or a brewery that's been around for over 20 years, does that mean it's easy to get into the business? You know, whether this is easier to just kind of, where does that come into play? What would you say? Well, you know, Andrea, you can go since you.
I would say that it's, you know, any new business is not going to be terribly easy, but it is easier today for small new breweries to get their product out in front of people. You know, there are a lot of package stores that I've spoken to that anything Vermont craft. You know, I'll put anything Vermont craft in here. If it sells, I'll reorder it. If it doesn't, I won't. So that gives any new brewery an opportunity to get their stuff out into the general public. Does that mean that if they're putting out not so great beer that they'll be around in 5 years? Probably not, but it does give them an avenue. And as these smaller breweries are coming online, you know, being a larger brewery, and, you know, not anywhere near Long Trail size, but we can't can all of our beers that we make off our experimental line, whereas these smaller breweries are able to, in everything that they make, they can put in cans. So when you go into some of these package stores, you know, and you see 6 different beers from a brewery that I only heard of last week, it's a little, it can be very difficult to make sure that our consumers aren't looking at our beers as like, oh yeah, but I know I can get those anytime, so I'm going to go to this beer instead. So that's where the difficulty lies with these new breweries coming online. And I love drinking especially other Vermont beers. I will not shy away from trying anybody else's beer, but it does make it. Yeah. I still have some that I haven't hit yet, but my checklist is pretty long. But it makes it harder to stay relevant because we're not able to just put out, you know, 100 cases of every single thing that we make.
Yeah. So, you know, and that's in regards to distribution, you know, you were just talking about going to, you know, getting in bars, getting to package stores, and the fact that there are new ones all the time. And some of them, of course, we talk small, but we could be talking nano size too, like a brewery that can have one beer, right? So, you know, Drew, would you say that is an issue for you also, for Long Trail also, about, you know, making sure Long Trail gets to these places, gets into these stores, or, you know, is being carried when there's a bunch of new ones that are on deck, or they've just started?
Yeah, I think, you know, for us, we have a lot of chain relationships and a lot of placements in some of the, you know, the C stores and the larger chain stores that, you know, having a partnership with a distributor for the last 30 years has really helped us. So it's not a matter of getting there. It's a matter of having people interested in it and not looking past it because they've seen it so many times. So that takes, you know, some creativity on our sales guys' ends, and building the relationships with the C-store managers and with the distributor, and kind of, you know, you go about it a whole different way. You can't just be kind of the cool kid who can just drop off beer and not really worry about it, for, you know, not to generalize it to the point of too simple. But, you know, for us, I think the best thing about it is that, you know, the cliche rising tide lifts all ships. I mean, you can't just enter in and make a subpar product. You have a discerning customer base now who demands high quality beer. And I think, you know, I've been here for 5 years, and beer just only keeps getting better, which, you know, there's so much good beer around that you can't just come in and not really have a quality product. So I think that's the most important thing for us is keeping it consistent and quality, and also the relationships that we develop that the smaller guys don't necessarily have. I think that can't be understated enough.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're talking beer, but we could be talking cheese. We could be talking whiskey, you know, distilleries, and you know, cider. So would you say in this, and we have a question here, I just saw it in the chat. So would you say that in this new beer economy, it's more important to have a flagship product versus having a new flavor every month? And is, you know, short-term, long-term, that sort of thing? Who would like to, you know, Andrea, you want to take that?
Sure. So one of the things that we talk about a lot here is a balance between the two. Having new stuff that we send out in draft, and it's also a really good way to judge whether or not something should be put out in cans. So we want to make sure that the ones that we keep in cans, we want to have both. We want to have a happy medium of both. And I think that ultimately will, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but hopefully that will be what helps long-term success is, you know, having that base of beers that people know if they pick that up, they're going to get a great beer. But also having stuff that we're putting out to the market that's new and unusual or unique or exciting. You know, there are all of these really great beers that are being put out now that 10 years ago nobody had ever heard of. So being able to present both to the public, you know, there are those days when somebody walks into a package store and they walk into a beer cave and I'm going here, so I know if I pick up a 4-pack, because it's an investment, it's a $15 in some case investment for 4 beers. They want to know that what they're buying, they're going to like. But also when they go out to a place to eat or whatever, oh, I've never tried this, this must be new, or to have a wait staff talking about this new experimental beer that's being that's on draft from us, giving them the opportunity to try new things, but also giving them the option of purchasing something that they already know that they really like when they go into a package store.
Well, I was just thinking that, you know, this is in regarding Long Trail and being out of state and not having that connection, you know, for people who live out of state. I'm just going to make this little side note. I know when I am not in Vermont and I'm in an area where there's maybe not a lot of beer choices, I'll be like, oh, Long Trail. I know that beer. I'm connected to that beer, and it's good beer, right? And you've been around a while. So I just wanted to mention that. So, but so back to Drew, just a question, because I'm just getting a question here from so you mentioned specialty beers with local ingredients in other places, you know, restaurants, for instance, people just expect a baseline of locally sourced ingredients. That's probably not feasible with beer, just volume-wise. But is it starting to move in that direction? Expectations of local as a part of the standard line, you know, in regards to beer? What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that locally produced is, I'm not sure if people are really, I hate to say it, but I'm not sure people are really like jumping on the local ingredient train, or, you know, consumers. I think it's more about where it was produced, and you know, it's just a hunch. I don't really have any kind of scientific data to back that up, but I just know that you know, when it's something like a fruit edition, I think it's great to have a locally sourced fruit for the storytelling aspect, and also for their supporting the local agriculture and the economy aspect as well. But I don't think that people at a you know, at a tap room or a bar are kind of being that discerning about it. I think they're more like, oh, this beer was brewed down the street, rather than this beer was brewed down the street with ingredients that were grown within 100 miles. I don't think necessarily that that's been don't necessarily think that that's kind of catching on, and maybe it will, and maybe it has, and I'm just not hanging out at the right places, but I don't.
So yeah, I mean, and there's also depending on how much volume you're making, the amount that you need to brew, or, that sort of thing. So we're coming up, it's 1:00, and we're running a little bit over, but I wanted to see if either of you, do you have a last thing to say about how you some advice, basically? What advice would you give to someone who has a business, whether, they're brewing beer, they're making cheese, what would you recommend what advice would you give to those people? Andrea, why don't you go first?
I would just say that relationships, Drew touched on it earlier, relationships are where it's at. In a day and age where we spend so much of our time in front of electronics, people are starved for those connections to other people. And beer is kind of one of those ways that brings people together. But so is food. And so, there are so many other ways for people to feel connected, and developing those relationships, whether it's to the consumer, whether it's to your raw material vendors, whether it's to distributors, and even competitors. The relationships that we have within the Vermont Brewers Association are priceless. We learn from each other, we share with each other. Those relationships are really where success is built.
Drew, what would you say?
Those are all great sentiments. The community aspect of it, I think, is so huge. Whether it's your local community or your community of businesses and breweries, I think it's just the Brewers Association offers twice a year an awesome opportunity for all the brewers to get together and really. I know our team really values those opportunities to engage with their local brewers and talk shop. And I know that more than one collaboration or favor on our end has come through it. But I think for me, when I look at it marketing wise, I just think authenticity is, I think, showing that there's humans behind the company, showing that there's a soul to the company, and showing that there's a product that's thoughtfully crafted and isn't just kind of, that there's real people behind it that are passionate and really caring, and authenticity to me is just a huge thing. And I think it's part of my background. It's part of just, I think, what helps make what we do successful, and helps make some of my favorite breweries around, brands that I admire, just how authentic everything is. So that'd be my main point to end on.
Yeah. No, those are both important points, and I would also add consistency, like brand consistency, right? Mm-hmm. Both Long Trail and 14th Star, and I don't want to say you have a lane, but you both breweries, when we talk about Long Trail, hiking, outdoors, that sort of, you've really kind of built that with that brand. 14th Star, of course, with the military, veteran, and just how you name your beers and what you give back to. So those are, I think, both brands or both companies or both beer products and brand, you're consistent with your messaging, and I think that like, know who you are, and that goes back to your authenticity, So anyway, I just want to thank you both for being in this webinar, and I'm recording this. So for the people who missed it or weren't able to come in today, it'll be up on our website with resources about this topic. So we always try to do that because we often get a lot of people watching these videos after the fact. So they can't join us at noon on Wednesday. So anyway, they'll be posted on the website, vermontfresh.net. But like I said, once again, this has been great, so interesting, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks. And we'll talk soon. Okay. Oh, I'm going to end the meeting now. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.